Hello and welcome. We are already 9 days into the new year 2021. And of course, we haven't had any edition of Simply Nitin so far. So, since this is the first edition of Simply Nitin of the new year, I thought I'll join you live and, of course, talk to you on some of the pertinent issues that India may face in the coming year. And as usual, we're going to talk about security of the nation, the national security issues, and what are the threats and challenges India will face in 2021. Now, prognosis or looking into the future, crystal gazing in the crystal ball is always dangerous and full of pitfalls. But I'm going to take that risk because it's only a matter of 1 year or so, and some of the trends are already visible. I'm Nitin Gokhale. So, what are the major threats India will face in 2021? Some of them are very obvious. The ongoing standoff on the line of actual control between Indian and Chinese armies and the amassing of troops on both sides is still continuing. And of course, even as we speak, there was an incident on the line of actual control in Ladakh this morning when one Chinese PLA soldier was caught on the Indian side of the LAC. And of course, he is now being interrogated, he is being investigated before he can be handed back. This is the second incident, remember, of a Chinese soldier apparently straying into Indian side of the LAC, who has been caught. The last incident happened on 21st October 2020. Incidentally, I was in Ladakh that time, and there was another incident of a Chinese vehicle, a civilian vehicle, of course, not a army vehicle or a PLA vehicle, coming into the Indian territory not very long ago, about 10 days ago. So there is this suspicion that the Chinese are up to something, and we will have to see what will happen as the soldier is interrogated. Now, this is the incident that has happened today is on the south bank of the Pangangso, but I'm not getting into the details because here today we are going to talk about an overall macro picture rather than speaking about individual incidents or specific incidents. So, as I was saying, the standoff, the Chinese aggression along the line of actual control in Ladakh continues to be a major threat, but not just Ladakh. In the summer months, India will have to be vigilant also in the other sectors, in the eastern sector, in Arunachal Pradesh or in Sikkim, and particularly the central sector in Uttarakhand is vulnerable, and therefore that threat of a Chinese aggression along the line of actual control or ingress or infiltration or nibbling, as we call it, the salami slicing tactics that the Chinese do on the boundary or the border will continue this year, and therefore India will have to be absolutely on its guard as far as the northern borders are concerned. China is not only going to be belligerent on the border itself, the physical border, but it's going to be actually very aggressive on other international forums. Wherever India is with China on the international forums, it will try and put India down. It will try and cut India down to size, especially in areas like or forums like FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, which may take action or may put Pakistan into the grey list or the blacklist of being a terror state or a state that finances terrorism. There, China will come to Pakistan's aid. It might even protect Pakistan in other multilateral forums under the United Nations or in other forums like the IMF and the ADB, the Asian Development Bank. So, therefore, that is something that India will have to be careful about as far as China is concerned. The proxy war by Pakistan in Jammu and Kashmir and along the infiltration along the line of control, which is the LOC in Jammu and Kashmir, will continue. It shows no sign of being reduced by Pakistan, and therefore the Indian troops, Indian army, will have to be ever vigilant. The Rashtriya Rifles deployed in Jammu and Kashmir, CRPF, BSF, all the other security forces, the Jammu and Kashmir police will have to remain as alert as they have been over the past so many years now. So that is the other threat that India faces, which is a continuous threat. But what has happened in 2020 has also added a new dimension to the challenge and the threats that India is facing. And that is something that Indian security planners have been speaking about, have been predicting for at least 15 years now. And that is the collusive threat, where China and Pakistan get together and move against India together. Remember in 1965, 1971 wars, or even during the other conflicts, the proxy war that is going on in J&K, China has largely remained out of it, out of these conflicts, except making some noises and making some threatening moves in Arunachal Pradesh sometimes in during the Kargil conflict, or in the 71 war too. But the collusivity between China and Pakistan is now real. The scenario, the worst case scenario that India has been speaking about, India's security planners have been speaking about in what we call the northern and the western borders, is now more or less a real threat. A war may not happen, but it's a real threat as far as India is concerned. A two front pincer movement by China and Pakistan against India in terms of amassing troops or creating incidents on the LOC and the LAC together simultaneously is now a worst case scenario which is coming true. It's a threat. It's the reality of war may not be coming true immediately, although you never know. With these incidents, they have the tendency of acting as a trigger for a larger conflict. So the worst case scenario of a two front threat is now real, and India has to make adjustments for adjustments to its security strategy because of this threat. And of course, the Ladakh operation or the LAC aggression is also part of China's attempts to help Pakistan not facing India's pressure, because Pakistan has been under pressure from India, and the new development of infrastructure in Ladakh is seen by China as something that will threaten the part of CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, going through Gilgit-Baltistan, or what is we in our parlance called the Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So therefore, this is now a worst case scenario which is coming true. It's a threat I keep mentioning of the challenges that are coming. The war may not happen, but as I said again, in these situations, nobody can really predict. Going forward, another challenge the government of India faces is to shape and consolidate a new political paradigm in Jammu and Kashmir. Although elections have been held to the local bodies there, the district development councils. There was very successful elections in Jammu and Kashmir, as we know. People have voted in large numbers. So democracy is kicking and alive in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in the Kashmir Valley, as you can see. But to consolidate a new kind of paradigm there, and allowing different people a new leadership, a new grammar of politics in Jammu and Kashmir will take some time to get consolidated. And that's a challenge that it's a security challenge. One, because Pakistan continues to send terrorists inside Jammu and Kashmir. As you know, a couple of newly elected people were killed immediately after the elections took place. So therefore, that challenge will continue to be staring India in its face. Moving to east, and specifically to northeast, India will have to really keep a very close watch on the situation in the northeast. Right now, it's under control. Most of the insurgent groups there have either made peace with government of India or have become ineffective. But northeast insurgency is such that it can be ignited and reignited anytime the people there want. This gentleman in the middle is Muiwa, T.H. Muiwa, the leader of the NSCN-IM, the Nationalist Socialist Council of Nagaland. Uh, Muiwa is the leader and the oldest insurgent leader now alive uh, in the northeast. He has been speaking to government of India, or his outfit has been speaking to government of India since 1997. But there is no breakthrough or no accord as far as the Naga insurgency or the other insurgencies are concerned. The other new or a renewed threat that has come into northeast is or will come into northeast in 2021 is the possibility of China again propping up some of the insurgent groups in the northeast. This is not something new that has happened since the 1960s, when even Muiwa had actually walked across through Burma, then Burma, now Myanmar, into southwestern China, the Yunnan province, where they had marched from Nagaland into the Chinese territory to try and get help from the Chinese to carry out their insurgency. But this threat is real. It might happen that the Chinese, to open up another front against India, may prop up and supply the insurgent groups with arms and ammunition and create unrest in the region, the seven states of the region, which is what we call collectively Northeast. That's, of course, the threat in the Northeast. Uh, Looking at the larger context of Indo-Pacific, the Quad mechanism has been activated and quite fast in the past couple of years. But 2021 will actually be a key year in calibrating Quad, whether it can be expanded into more areas. Right now, it is political and diplomatic. It has not yet gone into what I call the trade and commerce area, and there is no security dimension to Quad as yet. Although all the four Quad countries, India, United States, Australia, and Japan, have also carried out, after a gap of 13 years, exercise Malabar, this time in 2020. It has been renewed, the four-way exercise Malabar, it's a naval exercise. But most of the decision makers in all these four countries have been careful in not giving Quad a military dimension as yet. In fact, I think one of India's senior military naval naval leaders has also said there is no military dimension to Quad as yet. But India will have to keep a watch on how it can be leveraged against China if there is pressure from China on the land borders. We'll have to see that. The other challenge that India faces, and a threat also, it's a two side. These two are two sides of the same coin: a challenge and a threat by the Chinese, increasing forays into the neighborhood. Their footprints are now large, they are visible, and they do not mind buying their way into the neighborhood. As someone has described, a term has been used to talk about the Chinese way of dealing with political leaders, with business leaders in the neighborhood and elsewhere across the world. It is called elite buying. That the Chinese influence and buy out elites in these countries, smaller countries, who are decision makers, who are the people who decide the destiny of their nations. And the Chinese have gone about systematically pocketing these people or their influence. So, as we know, the Chinese footprint in the neighborhood has always been a cause of worry. But India, of course, does its countermeasures very well. Of late, it has been doing. Take the example of Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and also in Nepal, where the Chinese seem to have overreached themselves very overtly and very blatantly. They are interfering in the Nepalese political system. The polity of Nepal is now beholden, it seems, according to all the reports coming from there, to the Chinese Communist Party, which is resented by the general people there, the common citizens, and that may be an overreach or an overkill the Chinese have done. But India will have to keep up the game. India will have to be in the game, not give up. The Chinese, of course, we know how they made inroads into Sri Lanka. The Colombo Port City project, for instance, is a prime example and a living monument to what the Chinese have done in Sri Lanka, in Colombo particularly, where they have reclaimed large parts of the sea near the Colombo city and are building a new uh, Colombo, port city for use exclusively by the Chinese on very unfavorable terms as far as the Sri Lankans are concerned. So that's a threat and a challenge that India faces in the neighborhood, in the immediate neighborhood, and of course the increasing forays of the Chinese in the Indian Ocean region, in the Indo-Pacific. It's a threat that collectively will have to be met by the four Quad countries and others like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and South Korea, maybe in some parts, not exactly in Indo-Pacific, but near the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN countries will have to balance their requirement of their ties with China as well as with the other countries that I mentioned. Finally, the threat of internal security challenges for India are ever present. The Maoist or the left wing extremists may be down right now; they're not out. Remember, they have revived themselves number of times. So the central Indian areas of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and parts of Bihar and parts of Andhra Pradesh cannot be complacent. The Maoists can revive themselves anytime. Although the support has gone down, government has gone about systematically overcoming their challenge, combating their insurgency, as well as combating or getting control of some of the areas which were not under the government control over the years. So situation there right now is under control, but it has to be watched very carefully. There should be no complacency as far as those areas are concerned. Why have I mentioned rural to urban migration? We all saw what happened in March when the lockdown was announced after the COVID spread, and lakhs and lakhs of laborers were heading back to their homes in villages and semi-urban areas, semi-rural areas in those months. But because jobs are not available there in such large numbers, they will eventually come back. Will have already started coming back to the urban areas. Now it's a twofold threat. I'm not saying it's a security threat. There's a twofold threat to the law and order as well as the social harmony. Now, what happens is when these laborers come back, they come back with a hope that they will get the same jobs, same kind of salary, and same kind of perks that they would have got in their jobs here. But that may not be true because the economy is not doing too well. But they have no choice but to come back to start working in the urban areas. So, one is, of course, the resentment that might build up amongst these laborers for not getting the same kind of a salary or of that level pre-COVID, which might turn into a mass movement, or it might turn into some kind of protest movement. Or the second larger challenge that I see is the increasing inability of the civic infrastructure in larger cities and metropolises in coping with the increasing influx which is bound to happen. People coming back from rural areas will have to be living in these towns, and the infrastructure just doesn't seem to be enough to give a dignified life to these laborers and to all others who are living in the metropolitan cities. Although there are a lot of these urban housing projects, there are projects for development of urban infrastructure, but India will have to really force the pace as far as the infrastructure development in the urban areas are concerned. Rural areas, of course, will continue to be the focus for the government, but I brought this in although it is not a pure security threat, but this is a challenge that the governments will face, and the big cities and towns will face when the reverse migration or the returning laborers will come back into the cities. So that's the crystal gazing I wanted to do about what are the challenges India will face on the security front. Uh, I've already listed them out. You can have your own list, I'm sure. And I mean, there is always this possibility of something that one cannot predict. I am not going to call it the black swan event because many of these threat scenarios can be predicted or it can be anticipated. But again, who had anticipated the Chinese moves in the summer of 2020? Having come into that position or that situation now, India has no choice but to meet it resolutely on the border, which it has done very well. But it has to now reverse that deployment, or it has to push back the Chinese status quo, and it has to be restored at the LAC, and of course, then consolidate India's defenses. India never goes into anybody's territory, but if somebody tries to come into Indian territory, then they have to be stopped, as it was done in Ladakh. So, on that note, I just want to sign off from the first edition of Simply Nitin this year. Do keep tuned in. Do watch us on YouTube. We need more subscribers. Show us your love and your affection. If you like these programs, not just Simply Nitin, but our website, stratnewsglobal.com, and of course our social media handles on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and keep sending suggestions, which we will take on board as we have been doing in the past, and keep showing the same support and same love to Strat News Global and of course Simply Nitin. I'm Nitin Gokhale, and I'm bidding goodbye, and have a good evening and a good weekend coming forward. Thank you.